see. Now, there's some differences I think that we can draw, right? Obviously, we're going to hopefully see pictures later, the layout of the room.
Okay, let's go.
Rule of evidence is in effect says you cannot be in court unless you're testifying. Once you have testified, do not discuss your testimony with anybody else except the lawyers, okay? If you would say your first and last name and spell it for my court reporter, please.
Carol Darch, Caroldarch.
Ms. Dinger.
Thank you, Judge. Good morning.
Good morning.
I can already tell you that you're real soft-spoken, so if you'll speak up, these folks want to hear you. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So introduce yourself to them. Tell them who you are.
I'm Officer Darch from Fort Worth Police Department.
I shouldn't ask this question, but how old are you?
I am 27 years old.
All right. When's your date of birth?
July 15, 1995.
Where did you grow up?
Glen Rose.
I'm sorry?
Glen Rose, Texas.
And when did you become a Fort Worth police officer?
I started the academy August 21st, 2017.
When did you graduate from the academy?
April 13th, 2018.
What did you do as far as job-wise before you were a Fort Worth police officer?
I was a waitress.
And just in the Glen Rose area?
Yes.
What made you want to be a Fort Worth police officer?
I just have a knack for helping people.
And did you have a particular area that you wanted to work in the area of Fort Worth?
East side.
Why East Side?
It's just busier. You have more calls, more experience over on that side of town. There's a lot more to do.
Can you explain to us that doesn't know how the different districts are broken up, where is the East Side start and end?
Now East Side starts on Vaughn and I believe ends at DFW Airport. I'm not for sure on that, so don't quote me. And then it goes, yeah, about that area.
Okay, all right. Okay, so you graduated in April of 2018. I want to go through the different training that you received to be a police officer. So start at the beginning. You apply to be a police officer. What's the next step?
For me, it took about a year. I don't know for other people. You go through your background. You do your initial PAT test, the physical assessment test.
Let me stop. What is the physical assessment test composed of? What do you do?
So it's 2 minutes and 43 seconds that you have to do it under. It's just you run a lap, you jump a fence, you go up and down 7 flights of stairs. There's a push-pull machine. You run in, you drag a 175-pound dummy, like, I can't remember how many yards exactly. And then you go and you shoot 12 times with your good hand, or 13 times with your good hand, 12 times with your offhand.
What are you shooting?
A laser gun.
And you said a what kind of gun?
A laser gun.
And so are you shooting live bullets?
No.
And when you say laser gun, explain to us what that means.
Every time you click the trigger, just a green laser appears on the wall.
All right, are there any other physical components?
During the academy, you run every day, you do push-ups, things like that.
Okay. All right, so after you have your PAT test, your physical agility test, what's the next thing?
You go through backgrounds. Once you're clear through backgrounds, then you start the academy.
And once you start the academy, let's break up the different phases of the academy. In total, about how long is the academy?
It's close to 9 months. I know it's pretty lengthy. I can't say exactly how long it is, but it's close to 9 months.
How long does the initial application background check process take before you start the academy?
It took me approximately a year.
So you got that year first, and then you start the actual academy that takes maybe around 9 months or so.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so let's break up the academy. Tell me about, do you remember what's the first part of the academy that you did?
The first couple of weeks you come in, you're in plain clothes, which is just business casual. And it's a lot of classroom. The first 2 weeks you learn a little bit in our control tactics, but not much. It's basically just classroom.
When you say control tactics, can you explain to the jury what that means?
Control tactics are like what you would use to take someone to the ground, handcuffing maneuvers, things like that.
And you said that's not that long, or that's not that much?
You don't do much in the first 2 weeks of the academy. Then they really start bringing you in and getting more involved in that.
And so after the first few weeks of classroom, what's the next phase, if you remember?
I mean, you do the classroom the entire time. So in the morning when you get there, it's usually your PT or your CT, which CT is control tactics, and then, going and running, things like that. That differs every day, just depending if the control tactics room was open when you first got there or not. We had a senior class above us, so I believe we started out running and doing our setups, things like that, and then we would go into the control tactics room, and then we would shower and then go to the classroom.
And about how many people were in your academy class, would you say?
I believe when we started, it was in the 40s.
And then what else, or what's some other phases that you go through, some other things?
It just gets more involved and progresses as you go further. It's like baby steps, or crawling baby steps, walking, running, full sprint.
Do you learn about the Texas Penal Code,
Yes.
the basic laws of the state of Texas?
Yes, ma'am.
Is there what's called a general orders for the Fort Worth Police Department?
Yes, ma'am.
And tell us what that is.
General orders is basically just your standard operating procedures. Any call that you're going to go to, there is a general order on it, on how to handle that call, how to approach the call, things like that.
So when were you officially cut loose, or I guess the graduation day, are you then free to go out on the street by yourself?
It's not. You have to go through a field training process, and that's a couple months within itself. I didn't initially start the field training process right away.
And why was that?
I had a broken foot and had to have surgery.
So within that first 8 or 9 months of the academy, are you guys trained about public intoxication?
Yes.
And in what way?
We have a red man scenario, which is where someone gets in a full padded suit, and you go in and you work the call. I think they do 3 different call scenarios, one where they're completely compliant, one where they have passive resistance, and then one where it's like active resistance, where they're just not complying with anything you say, and then you handle the situation appropriately.
Why is it called Red Man?
Because they put them in a red padded suit,
Okay.
so that the role players don't get injured.
Okay. And so the people that are doing the role playing in that red suit, are those your supervisors or your teachers?
It can be instructors. They usually have 1 or 2 instructors in the red man suits, but it can also be other officers.
And are all 40 of you guys in that scenario, or are you all in different roles?
No, so they break you up. Most of the time when you go into red man, you go in alone, and you'll do your scenario alone. They will send in a second partner once you progress further along.
Are there also, within the academy, something called patrol procedures?
Yes, ma'am.
Explain that to us.
We did that in the last couple weeks of the academy. It's a week long, and you have other officers that have volunteered to come down to the academy and help you, and you'll run calls like domestics in a controlled environment. You'll run fight scenes, things like that of that nature, and you're just learning how to handle the call, basically. They'll dispatch you over the radio. Once you're dispatched over the radio, you go into the tactical village, and once you're in the tactical village, that's when you'll actually handle the call.
Explain to them what the tactical village is.
Tactical village is a mock village. I mean, we have a fake school in there. We have a fake apartment upstairs, a fake store. It's a mock village.
And may I approach the jury? Do you guys need a cough drop? Anybody, maybe? I have some. Okay, there you go. All right. Okay. You need a cough drop?
I'm okay, thank
You're
you.
all right. All right. Okay, so you were talking about the patrol procedures, and you mentioned that somebody will radio in or radio out. What does that mean?
Usually it's someone from communications, a dispatcher, and you'll have your handheld radio, and they will actually get on there, and usually they use ocean signs, just because it's not used in the field. They'll call out Ocean 211, you're responding to a domestic at this location, and this is your call detail.
When you say this is your call detail, give me an example of the kind of information you keep getting.
You're responding to a domestic at this address. There's a male and female inside. You can hear screaming and things being thrown around.
And then what's the purpose? You then, I guess, are being taken through how you should approach and handle that scene? That type of call, rather?
The first day, yes. As the week progresses, you're handling the calls on your own, just to see how you respond to your training that you've received for the last 9 months.
And when does the patrol procedures part come within those 8 or 9 months of the academy?
We did it the last couple weeks of our academy. I think they've since changed it. I know we did ours right at the end.
You said, you gave an example of a domestic. What are the other types of different calls that you are run through in that academy?
I believe we do a traffic stop. We do a domestic. We do public intox. I think we do a sexual assault, and I'm not sure what else. I can't remember.
Are they trying to expose you to just different types of calls?
Yes, ma'am.
And how do you know as an officer when you're going through these different exercises if you're doing them correctly or not?
You're being evaluated at the end of each call that you go to. So say I responded to the domestic in the apartment A. There are 2 officers there, and they will be evaluating you the entire time you're handling the call. And then when you break down after the call, they'll tell you what you did right, what you did wrong, what you can improve on.
What happens if you get, I guess, like a bad grade on a particular type of call or a particular type of procedure? Can you fail this section?
Yes.
Okay. What happens if you do?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I didn't fail.
All right, you passed. Now tell me, is there a part of the academy that's called officer survival?
Yes, it's the week after patrol procedures.
So you said they've now moved patrol procedures not to the end anymore. Do you know, is it more towards the middle or the beginning, or do you know?
I don't know. I just know that they moved it up earlier.
Okay. So tell me about officer survival.
Officer survival is you're still responding to calls, you're still being dispatched like in patrol procedures. It's just a heightened and elevated, they're trying to stress you out. They're trying to see how you react under stress.
Why is it important to assess how somebody acts under stress as a police officer?
To know how they're going to react in stressful situations out in the field.
Sure. So the patrol procedures, can you tell me about how long that is?
Each are a week. So patrol procedures a week, and then officer survival's a week.
And can you give me an example of something they would do to mimic a stressful situation for you guys in officer survival?
In officer survival, there's a scene where it's an officer's down, and you have to go and like apply a tourniquet, extract the officer from the location, and I believe there's an active shooter while it's happening. Don't quote me on that because I don't remember.
Okay. Each one of these scenarios you described, so for example, an active shooter, is it you by yourself going in and assessing the situation, or are there other people that are members as far as participating in the academy?
I believe during officer survival, you were sent in with a teammate, a partner, so you weren't responding to those alone.
For the most part, when you actually do get out of the academy through field training and on the streets, do you typically respond with a partner, or are you normally by yourself?
It's very customary for dispatch to dispatch 2 officers.
Why?
Officer safety.
Now, are you going back to the academy for a second, are you also trained in CPR, basic life-saving
Yes.
techniques? And how long is that?
TACMED comes in, I want to say it's an 8-hour course. We did it one day.
Okay, you just said the word TAC-MED. Tell us what that is.
That's our tactical medical unit. They usually go out with SWAT and things like that, or if an officer's shot, they'll show up first on the scene. It's basically just an ambulance service. It's officers that have their paramedic.
So there's a particular division or group of officers within Fort Worth Police Department that has tactical medical training.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you?
No.
But you did go through an 8-hour course in the academy about the basics of that, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Can you give me some examples besides CPR of what training you received there?
They teach you to apply tourniquets, chest seals, your basic CPR.
Can you tell the jury what a chest seal is?
A chest seal is like a thin piece of plastic that is extremely sticky on one side. And when there's a hole anywhere in the abdomen, you want to seal it up so that air is not getting.
When you said anywhere in the abdomen, why is it just the abdomen?
I'm not for sure 100% on that. I know it has something to do with air and the lungs.
Okay. Because the name's chest seal,
Yes.
so that didn't make any sense to me. But regardless, it's some kind of sticky device, if you will, that can close or at least hold in the blood over some kind of wound.
Yes.
Okay. Have you ever used that before?
I have.
And you're certainly trained on how to do that.
Yes.
So, do you just carry around a chest seal on your person, or how do you have that with you?
Some officers carry it around in their vest if they have an outer vest. I don't. I have a TACMED kit, and it's a small bag that we're all issued after the academy. I carry mine in my car unless I know that I'm going on a shooting or a stabbing, something along those lines.
What's in that TACMED kit?
You have an Israeli bandage, which is a tourniquet. You have a rubber tourniquet. You have a couple chest seals, and you have quick clot and some gauze and shears.
Is there a stress-induced training that is different than officer survival? Is that something separate, or is that included in the officer survival?
The stress-induced training is the entire academy.
Sure.
But the main part is officer survival.
All right. And so when you talked about public intoxication, a traffic stop, domestic violence, are there different ways to approach each type of those scenarios that you're presented?
Yes, ma'am. There's a different way to approach every call.
And is that the type of training you're receiving pretty much all throughout the academy?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you getting feedback as well about that, the evaluation process?
Yes, ma'am.
And are you getting, I guess, counseled or feedback from the general orders, or is it just from the instructors, or both?
The instructors will quote the general orders, and especially if you mess up, they will let you know which general order.
Okay. So once you go through the academy, and then your graduation date was April the 13th of 2018, is that
Yes, ma'am.
right? Now, after you graduate, what happens?
You graduate, and then you are assigned your first field training officer, and you're assigned to a side of town. Most officers start 1 to 2 days after the academy, starting with their FTO.
Is there a in-service training that goes on for a couple weeks between those two?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes,
tell me
ma'am.
about that.
I'm sorry, after graduation, there is the 2 weeks of in-service, where you go and you just get, so BPOC, which is the standard for officers in Texas, they mandate that every 2 years training cycle, you have to have 40 hours of training on these specific things, legislative updates, things like that.
Kind of a continuing education
Yes,
for
ma'am.
officers? All right. After the in-service training, what's next?
After in-service, you go to FTO.
Field training?
Yes.
And you are assigned, you said one officer or multiple officers?
You're assigned one officer for each phase.
All right, take us through the different phases.
So your first phase is your field training officer, your FTO, is doing everything. You're just watching them and learning how to become an officer in the field. Second phase, you
Let me stop
start,
you real quick. First phase, in total, how long is the field training process?
I want to say it's 3 or 4 weeks. I'm not sure the exact length on it, but it's 3 or 4 weeks.
So if the first phase where the field training officer is doing everything, about how long does that last?
3 or 4 weeks.
Okay, so I said the entire field training process. so-
Okay, the entire field training process is probably 4, 5, 6 months. somewhere in there.
So we've got the academy, 8 or 9 months, we graduate, we've got 2 weeks of in-service, then we move on to field training for 4 to 6 months.
Yes, ma'am.
First phase, 3 to 4 weeks,
Yes, ma'am.
field training officer is doing everything.
Yes.
You're watching.
You're watching. You're not even driving.
Okay, when the field training officer, you say doing everything, are they responding to calls out in the public?
They are.
What types of calls?
Any call that comes in, whether it's shooting, domestic, a stabbing, a robbery, you're responding to whatever is on your side of town.
And are you able to ask any questions during that time?
Yes, ma'am. You ask all of your questions.
That's the purpose, right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. After the first phase, what's the next thing?
Second phase, that's where you start taking over. You start driving. You're the lead officer. You're figuring out how to respond to calls, and your field training officer is right there next to you, letting you know if you're doing it right. They'll pull you aside, tell you if you mess something up, and then you go from there.
After the second phase, is that another 2 or 3, or they say so 3 or 4 weeks?
Yes, ma'am.
What's the next thing after the second phase?
I believe that's when you go into midterm, and that's 2 to 3 weeks. And it's just an evaluation of how you're developing as an officer in those first 2 phases.
And when you say there's an evaluation, is the field training officer that's been with you the first and second the one evaluating you?
No, so every phase of FTO, you have a different officer riding with you.
So then who's evaluating you at midterm? Those 2 that have ridden with you so far? Or
No, someone different.
Okay. How is the person during midterm, if there's somebody different than has been riding with you and observing you, how are they able to evaluate you?
They have a FTO manual, and it is just basically checking off the boxes. Are they proficient in working a domestic? Do they know how to fill out a packet? Do they know the appropriate questions to ask?
So I guess I'm just trying to understand if that person hasn't been with you to answer those questions, to see you do it, are they getting feedback from the other FTOs?
No, they're with you in the car.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
you're answering calls
I
together.
got you. Okay, so the midterm phase is somewhat different than the first and second, but they're with you for those, how long, how many weeks?
2 to 3 weeks.
Gotcha, okay. And then what happens after midterm?
After midterm, you go into third phase, which is another 3 or 4 week process. And you are the lead officer. You should be doing everything on your own by now. You should know your area that you're in, how to get to a call quickly. You should know how to process all of your own paperwork, how to do your reports, things like that.
And then what's after third phase?
That's when you go into ghost phase. Usually the officer that's with you will be in plain clothes. They can wear a uniform, but you are not to ask them questions. They're a ghost. You're answering all your own calls. If you have a question, it's usually another officer that's on the scene with you that you'll answer. You'll ask that question to, and they'll answer you, but you're not allowed to ask your ghost anything. They're just strictly there to evaluate you.
When we started talking about field training, you said you get assigned a particular area or district.
Yes.
Do you stay in that same area or district the entire field training process?
For me, I did. I stayed in Eastside. I know before that they had switched different sides of town. So you could be in North for one phase, you could be in South for the next.
Okay, after field training is complete, the ghost phase is the last phase. What happens after that?
You get cut loose.
And when you say cut loose, do you have somebody riding in the car with you?
You are a solo officer.
is each officer, as far as patrol is concerned, in Fort Worth, are they assigned a particular car?
You're not assigned cars. It's you take what you get and you hope you get a good one.
So when you show up, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's clean.
All right. So when you show up to a shift, you just go out and hope that there's a car there you can take and,
Yes, ma'am.
like I said, that's clean. All right. So when did you actually get, quote, cut loose?
I got cut loose in, I want to say the later half of September of 2019.
What area were you assigned to when you were on your own?
I was in East Division as an overflow spot for a couple, I want to say maybe a week. And then I got assigned to Baker Division, where I'd never been. And I was there approximately 2 weeks before the shooting.
And where is Baker Division?
Baker Division is from 8th Avenue to Vaughn and then Lancaster to Berry.
Is that considered east side or something different?
It's Central Division.
You didn't know that area at all?
No, ma'am.
All right. So you were in east side for about a week as a floater, then you were in Central or Baker District.
Yes, ma'am.
You said how many weeks before the shooting?
Approximately 2 weeks.
And you had really only been out on your own for about a month or so before the shooting happened, is that
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
Due to the surgery you had?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, when you went to the academy and you graduated in April of 2018, did Aaron Dean also graduate with your academy class?
He did.
So he would have graduated on the same day.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know if he went through the same type of training that we just all talked about?
It was pretty standardized training, yes, ma'am.
Do you know what day he would have been cut loose?
I don't.
Would it have been different than you because of your surgery?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And tell me about the east side of Fort Worth. Describe that area to us, those of us that have never been there. What's it like?
It's high crime. There's a lot of drugs, a lot of property crime, a lot. If you're thinking about it, East Side's got it.
Okay. Are there other parts of town that have the same type of reputation?
Yes, South Side and Baker Division.
So central, east side, and south side.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So west side and north side, do they have that kind of reputation?
West Side has its own crime off of Las Vegas Trail, and North Side, not so much.
Okay. And give me some examples. Would Joe T. Garcia's be in north side?
I believe that's Northwest.
Northwest. All right. Okay. So you ended up, at that time, you had worked in the Baker District for maybe about 2 weeks or so. So had you actually worked East Allen area before the shooting had occurred?
I may have answered calls there. It's been so long ago, I can't tell you for sure that I had. I've been in the area, though.
Would East Allen be in the Baker District, that central Baker
Yes,
District?
ma'am.
Okay.
It's Baker 15.
And what does that mean, Baker 15?
It's the beat, they're broken up. So Baker Division is broke up into different beats, and every officer is responsible for a different beat.
Give us an idea as far as a beat is concerned. How big is a beat?
They're not very big. I don't know the exact dimensions on one.
I mean, are we talking about 50 miles, or are we talking about a couple blocks?
No, usually just a couple blocks.
And so when you get to October of 2019, had you responded on your own to, if you're cut loose on September of 2019, you're maybe out for about a month or so, month and change. Had you responded to different types of calls at that point on your own?
Some, yes.
Give me examples of the types of calls that you would have responded to.
Definitely domestics. The city is heavy call load with domestics. I don't know exactly what I had responded to on my own, but in field training, you respond to just about everything. I mean, my second day of first phase, I was responding to a shooting, so.
Just the jury knows, just a normal, let's say, week for you now. Out on your own, cut loose, you've been out have now for, 3 years or more.
Yes.
So what are the types of calls that you're responding to? Give us some examples.
Domestic shooting, stabbings, open structures, burglaries, welfare checks, things of those nature.
And you said shootings and stabbings, we know what that is. Domestics, we know what that is. Tell me what an open structure type of call would be.
An open structure is you're driving down the road in the middle of the night and you see a door open on a business, right? The door's not supposed to be open, you know it's not supposed to be open, so you go and check it out.
What about welfare check? Can you tell us what that is?
A welfare check is usually for someone that's in bad health. Through my training and experience, what I've dealt with, it'll be a family member, a neighbor, a concerned friend calling in, just saying, hey, I haven't heard from Joe in a couple days. Can you swing by and check on him?
All right. And so is a welfare check different than an open structure?
Yes, ma'am, vastly.
Okay. One is the circumstance we're talking about, maybe a door or a window being open. Another, meaning the welfare check, would be, I haven't heard from my dad. I haven't heard from my grandmother.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Had you at that time, I know you don't know exactly, and if you don't know, that's okay. Had you worked open structure calls up to that point? Can you remember?
I'm not 100% certain on that, no, ma'am.
Have you now?
Yes, ma'am.
And the same for welfare check calls. Do you know whether you had done any of those back in those 3 or, I guess, month or so?
I'm not sure.
Have you now?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Okay. And had you also, maybe you don't remember about at that point, but up until now, you worked burglary calls before.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you ever worked a burglary where it's in progress?
Yes, ma'am.
Meaning when you get out there, the suspect's in the house and or in the business running away?
Yes, ma'am.
And when as far as burglary calls are concerned, well, I'm going to ask you each one. Welfare checks, how common are those?
Welfare rate checks, you get those. On night shift, they're not too common. On day shift, you're getting them left and right.
What about burglary calls? How common are those?
Very common.
And what about open structure calls?
Very common.
So you don't know if you had necessarily responded to that. Let's talk about narrowing it in now, the 1200 block of East Allen. Do you know whether you'd ever responded to that particular intersection and area?
I can't tell you with exact certainty.
Besides the shooting that occurred on October the 12th, in 2019, have you responded to any calls over the last 3 years in the 1200 block of East Allen?
Yes, ma'am, multiple.
Okay. So let's talk. Do you know who James Smith is, by the way?
I don't. I've never met him.
All right. You were not a part of the investigation out there at the scene when this happened, correct? Meaning you were not a part of the major case investigation, interviewing people.
No.
You were getting interviewed.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Okay. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
And you and I have met before, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you've met with Dale as well?
Yes, ma'am.
And Mo, who I don't know if he's in here, but our investigator?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And we've met how many times, do you think?
3 or 4.
Okay. And when we've met, I think we've met over at outside the office, and we've also met over here in the office. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Who else has been present when Dale, myself, and Mo and you have met?
My cleat attorney, Terry Devlin.
Tell the jury what a cleat attorney is.
It's Combined Law Enforcement Association of Texas, and I pay in every month out of my check to the POA, which is the Police Officers Association, and cleat is with them. It's legal advice, legal attorneys for whatever you need, and it's very standard after a shooting to have your cleat attorney right there with you.
So tell them about that. So after a shooting happens, how does that cleat attorney get notified? Do you know about a shooting?
You can call them, your sergeant can call them, really, anyone that hears the shooting goes out can call an attorney and have them present at the scene.
Let's say you're going to make the call. Who do you call? How do you know who to call?
So Terry came and talked to our class, and she gave us her phone number during that class while we were still in the academy, and we're instructed to call that number.
And is Terry here in the courtroom today?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So she talked to y'all's class, gave you guys her card. Are there other CLEAT attorneys?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So a shooting happened, she gets called. Is she showing up pretty quick after the shooting happens?
It was fairly quick, yes, ma'am.